It's hard to explain the savagery of hope. Holly Black wrote that once. And it is a quote that has come back to me many, many times in the past year. And since the story I will tell you is riddled with hopes dashed and dreams lost, it is how I will start. Since my first day of kindergarten, I've moved so many times, it's crazy. I've moved from one home to another, one school to another, one curriculum to another, one friend to another, so many times I did not know what was and wasn't. I was used to it, this constant shifting and changing of life. Instability was my norm. And when I was younger, this was less concerning. We were young. Even our bodies weren't fully formed enough for us to be labeled independent, so how could our minds be? And so, for the first 4 years of my school life, up until the second grade, I moved schools each year and made new friends each year. As is human nature, however, the next year, everyone I tried to befriend already had a friend, a group of people, huddled around them. And they were gossiping and they were laughing. And where did that leave me? Alone. It left me alone. I became the social outcast, the new girl everywhere I went. I was talked about behind palms and in whispers, laughed at and pointed at when people thought I wasn't looking. And you could call it bullying, but I get it. I was a new, shiny object to gawk at in the wake of school monotony. I hoped, however. Each year, I clung to a dream, a kind of story I made up and told myself over and over again. I was what people might now call Delulu. And then, after a particularly grueling year, the 5th grade, my mom announced that we'd be going back home, to my home country, to Sudan. Oh, how I remember I cried. I'd seen what happened when I'd merely moved schools, the loneliness of it all. What would happen when I moved an entire continent? I begged and I pleaded, but my mother would not budge. She missed her home, she said, her job and her family. I hadn't thought much about my motherland since I'd left it at the age of 6. However, I still knew the basics from listening to my mother and her sisters' hours-long conversations on the phone. I knew, even then, that our economic and political states were slowly deteriorating, but that people were getting by relatively easily nonetheless. And so, towards the end of 2018, we moved back to Sudan. I'd been there before. The occasional holiday, and it really was not that bad. However, the prospect of attending school there completely threw me off. We moved into a little apartment beside my grand's house, and we began our lives in my home country. We went to my grand's every Friday, chatted with my cousins on her porch, had cookouts on her backyard, had long into midnight conversations with my neighbors about everything under the sun. It was a strange familial feeling that I was not used to, and I could not help but love it. However, the prospect of attending school still cast a shadow over my life, still sent a shiver down my spine. The school I was trying to get into was selective, and I found passing the admissions test to be incredibly difficult. And so my mom sought out the help of one of the teachers there. Even at 10 years old, I still remember thinking how strange that teacher was, almost overly kind. I stayed at her house all day, and she tutored me until the sun went down. And I thought how kind she was with her teaching, giving me little breaks in between to go play with her kids or to have a colorful cocktail her daughter made. And when we found out I got into the school, she celebrated as though the matter directly affected her. I still remember asking my mother why she was being so nice, why she cared so much. I was genuinely curious. But I soon found out that one teacher represented an entire community of people with the same sweet smile and kind heart. My first day at school, I was shaking, terrified. It was like my own personal doomsday, and I'd been dreading it all summer. While I realized now there was no need for so much fear, then I was ready to throw up. My first class, my heart sank as I looked around. There were groups and cliques and long-formed friendships in this school as well. My teacher pointed out where I should sit, and I reluctantly did so, situating myself in between a group of giggling girls. I pulled out my book, put my head down, and prayed the class would end. before I was suddenly bombarded by dozens of different questions, each from a different girl. Confused, but pleased, I talked my way through the entirety of that first class. And then the lunch break came, and I spent it alone, away from everyone. Before, they all huddled up around me, asking, questioning, wondering, and I threw myself onto them. Over the course of the next few years, Sudan became my safe haven. The familiar face at every corner, the kindness of everyone, the sense of family I got from merely walking down the street. I learned that that very first teacher was merely a sample of what the Sudanese people were capable of. Learned that my home country was one of beauty, of a history so rich and a culture of such wealth that we could barely control it ourselves. I learned about our pyramids and our pharaohs and their history. Learned about the Ottoman Empire and about our strength as a people. And for once in my life, the country I was from meant more to me than just a word. It meant all I was and all I would become. It meant my past, my present, and my future. I planned my life around it, around what I would do for it once I was old enough. I flourished under the careful care of my teachers and my friends over the course of the next few years. Learned I was incredibly extroverted under the right environment, who would have thought? Learned about more people than I knew what to do with. In paradise, I thrived. Then came the thing that cleanly split my life and the life of 45.6 million people in half. What formed a before and an after. On the 15th of April of last year, we were thrown into conflict. And we were forced apart, pulled away from one another. And I was thrown back into an old life I thought I'd left behind, into another new school. I sunk back into myself. I became the new girl again, the quiet one, the odd one out. And for once, I fully, completely appreciated the beauty of my long-gone homeland. The first thing I remember noticing after rejoining the outside world was how unbelievably normal everything looked. Flicking through my social media for the first time since my world had been ripped out beneath me, I expected every video and every post to be about the home me and 10.7 million people had lost overnight. But nothing. It was a surreal experience, and one I do not know how to begin to explain. My family and I fled through the Sudanese-Egyptian border. And the stark contrast between the dehumanizing conditions there and the sudden normalcy as we entered Egypt hit me like a bus. For some reason, the fact that other people's lives were continuing, going on normally, irritated me. I was furious, angry at news broadcasting and channels and media, even irrationally irritated with people who did nothing but go about their day-to-day lives normally. I had just lost everyone and everything that had made up my life for the past 5 years. And in my grief-ridden haze, I could not understand why or how people could carry on living so normally when my home was in ruins. Which brings us to why I'm standing here, opening up to a bunch of random strangers about something that's caused both me and 45.6 million people enough pain to last a lifetime. I've come to use my voice to speak up for those whose voices have been smothered. Because the heartbreaking part is, I'm one of the lucky ones. I managed to get out. I still have my family and my siblings with me. I survived. Because across Africa and across the globe are those with a story like mine. Those lost in the teeming mass of statistics of displacement. The difference here is that I have chosen to speak up for those whose voices who are now voiceless. Because that is my obligation as another human being. And so, will you? Thank you.